At our family celebration, my parents announced that they were giving my brother $1.3 million. Then my father looked directly at me and said, "You're a failure, Morgan. Learn to handle your own life." The ballroom fell quiet, not completely silent. That would have been easier instead. It became quiet enough for every raised eyebrow, awkward sip of champagne and whispered comment among the wealthy guests to feel deafening. My father stood beneath the crystal chandelier, with one proud hand resting on my brother Jason's shoulder. My mother remained beside him, diamonds gleaming at her throat, and the satisfied smile she always wore when the Thompson family appeared. Perfect. Jason looked genuinely surprised. His fiancée Charlotte held her champagne glass against her chest, and I stood alone beside a decorative palm near the wall, gripping my drink and regretting that I had come to help Jason and Charlotte begin their married life properly. My father announced, his voice polished and confident. "Victoria and I are giving them $1.30 million toward their first home." The room immediately responded. Soft gasps, polite applause. Guests leaned toward one another, impressed by the amount but and surprised by the favoritism. Everyone knew Jason was the child my parents proudly displayed as evidence of their success. Harvard graduate, vice president of Thompson Luxury Properties, perfect suit, perfect fiancé, perfect future. Then my father's eyes traveled across the ballroom and settled on me. His smile remained in place, but something colder appeared behind it. "Of course," he continued, "we only wish all our children gave us equal reasons to celebrate." Several guests turned in my direction. My throat tightened. I knew that tone. I had heard it at formal dinners, holiday gatherings, graduation parties, and every family occasion where my life became a warning about wasted potential. My mother did not interrupt him. She simply lifted her glass and watched. "If only you weren't such a failure, Morgan," Dad said, still smiling. "Perhaps one day you'll learn how to manage your own life." Nobody moved. The chandelier's light reflected along the edge of my glass while the champagne trembled inside it. Someone near the dessert table gave a nervous laugh, as though turning the insult into a joke might make it less cruel. Then a woman whispered to someone beside her, "That's the artist's daughter, isn't it?" Heat rushed across my face, not because I believed my father's words, because some small part of me still desperately wanted him not to believe them. Jason shifted beneath Dad's hand, but he remained silent. My father kept his grip on Jason's shoulder, presenting him to the ballroom as proof that the Thompson family had produced at least one successful child. I carefully placed my glass on the nearest table, slowly, deliberately, because moving too quickly would reveal how badly my hands were shaking. My mother narrowed her eyes at me. It was a silent warning I had understood since childhood. Do not make a scene. That was always the rule. They were permitted to humiliate me in public. I was expected to suffer in private. I had spent most of my life learning how to disappear inside beautiful rooms. When I was 12, I won first place in a regional youth art competition. My parents called it a pleasant hobby. At 17, I gave up the art school scholarship I had dreamed about because Dad insisted that artists starved and Thompsons did not waste opportunities. At 29, I finally left the finance career that had made me miserable and returned to painting. By 32, I lived in a modest Brooklyn apartment where half the living room served as my studio and the other half became a classroom for neighborhood children. Many of those children had never been told their drawings mattered. I gave them paintbrushes, paper, and permission to believe that what existed inside their imaginations deserved space in the world. My parents did not view that as courage. To them, it was simply failure presented in prettier colors. So I stood there in a second-hand black dress, surrounded by designer gowns and inherited diamonds, trying to keep my chin steady while my father's Words settled over me then I noticed Grandma Rose she sat near the edge of the ballroom in a navy dress, one hand resting on her cane and her silver hair pinned loosely behind her head. She was not smiling. Her eyes were fixed on me, not with embarrassment, not with pity, with understanding that almost broke me more completely than my father's insult. Grandma Rose was the only member of the Thompson family who had ever looked at my paintings and recognized something beyond rebellion. She had read every letter I sent during college. She kept every gallery postcard I mailed her years earlier. She had told me, your art reveals the truth before people are ready to face it. Across the room, her fingers tightened around the handle of her cane. My father had already begun turning back toward the guests, prepared to let my humiliation disappear beneath the rest of the celebration. Jason's engagement, Jason's money, Jason's future, my role in the family story had already been decided. The disappointing daughter, the cautionary example, the woman who should feel grateful merely to have received an invitation. I could have left. Part of me wanted to walk through the French doors, cross the terrace, order a car, and return to Brooklyn before dinner was served. Then Grandma Rose stood. At first her movement was so slow that it almost disappeared beneath the music and conversation. Charlotte noticed first, then Jason, then my mother. My father's confident smile began to weaken. Mother, he said. Most of the guests did not hear him, but I did. Grandma Rose did not answer. She began walking toward the small platform where the string quartet had performed earlier. Every step was slow but certain. Guests moved aside, uncertain of what was happening. My mother reacted first. Rose, perhaps this isn't the best time. Grandma lifted one hand. My mother stopped speaking. That alone caused several more guests to turn around. Grandma reached the microphone my father had left behind. She adjusted it with calm, steady hands and looked across the ballroom. For the first time that evening, my parents were no longer controlling the room. Dad stepped toward her, his jaw tightening. Mother, this is unnecessary. Grandma Rose looked at him the way only a mother can look at a grown son who has mistaken power for wisdom. Oh, Edward, she replied, her voice so calm that it frightened everyone. I believe it is entirely necessary. Then she turned toward me. Every person in the ballroom seemed to stop breathing. My grandmother placed one hand on the microphone and said, Edward and Victoria have shared their opinion of success tonight. She paused. Now it is my turn. The ballroom fell into complete silence. Grandma Rose rested both hands on her cane before looking around the room. Her voice wasn't loud, but every guest listened. Tonight my son has spoken about success, she said. I'd like to speak about character. Edward forced a smile. Mother, let's discuss this privately. No, Grandma replied. You've chosen to embarrass your daughter in public. I'll answer you in public. A wave of whispers spread through the crowd. Morgan remained frozen near the wall, unsure whether to stay or leave. Grandma turned toward her. Morgan, come stand beside me. Her legs felt heavy, but she slowly walked to the front of the ballroom. Grandma gently took her hand. When Morgan was 8 years old, she painted a picture of our family. Everyone else drew our beautiful house. Morgan painted people holding hands. Even then she understood something. This family forgot long ago that love is worth more than wealth. No one spoke. Edward's expression hardened. She abandoned a successful career, he interrupted. Grandma looked directly at him. No, Edward, she abandoned a life that made her miserable. She faced the guests again. My granddaughter teaches children who cannot afford expensive lessons. She gives them confidence, hope, and a reason to believe in themselves. Tell me, is that failure? Several guests quietly shook their heads. Charlotte lowered her eyes. Even Jason looked uncomfortable. Grandma continued. You've all heard about the $1.3 million my son has generously given away tonight. She smiled softly. Money can buy a house, it cannot buy kindness. It cannot buy integrity, and it certainly cannot buy the respect of your own children. The room became so quiet that the sound of crystal glasses clinking in the distance echoed through the ballroom. Edward's confident posture was beginning to fade. Grandma tightened her grip on Morgan's hand. "And before this evening ends, there is something every person in this room deserves to know." She looked straight at Edward. "It's time the truth comes out." The ballroom held its breath as Grandma Rose prepared to reveal the family secret. Grandma Rose let the silence settle before she spoke again. "For years," she said, "I've watched people mistake wealth for worth." She slowly reached into her handbag and removed a thick cream-colored envelope. "I never intended to discuss family business at Jason's engagement celebration, but after what happened tonight, I have no choice." Edward's face lost its color. "Mother, don't." She ignored him. 10 years ago, I created a family trust. My children believed they knew exactly how it would be divided." The guests exchanged curious glances. Grandma held up the envelope. They were wrong. Morgan stared at her grandmother in disbelief. "I wanted my legacy to go to the person who showed compassion, honesty, and courage, not simply the person with the biggest paycheck." Edward stepped forward. "This is inappropriate." "No," Grandma answered calmly. "What was inappropriate was humiliating your daughter for choosing a life of purpose." She opened the envelope. "I have spent the last 3 years quietly visiting Morgan's art classes." Morgan blinked. "You what?" Grandma smiled warmly. "I sat in the back of the room wearing an old coat and glasses. The children knew me only as Mrs. Rose." Morgan's eyes filled with tears as she remembered the elderly woman who never missed a Friday class. "You were there every week." Grandma looked around the ballroom. "I watched frightened children become confident because one woman believed in them. I watched Morgan spend her own savings buying paint instead of buying luxury for herself." Several guests lowered their heads. "That," Grandma continued, "is what real success looks like." Jason slowly walked toward his sister. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I should have spoken up." Morgan nodded but couldn't find the words. Grandma folded the papers and smiled. "As for my estate." She paused just long enough for every heartbeat in the ballroom to feel louder. "My attorney will announce my final decision at tomorrow's family meeting." A ripple of surprise spread across the room. Edward looked shaken for the first time in years. The celebration was over. No one cared about the engagement gift anymore. Every person in the ballroom wanted to know one thing. What had Grandma Rose decided? The following afternoon, the Thompson family gathered in the conference room of the family law office. No orchestra, no champagne, no applause, only silence. Morgan sat beside Grandma Rose while Edward and Victoria occupied the opposite side of the polished oak table. Jason and Charlotte remained quiet, sensing that everything was about to change. At exactly 10 o'clock, the family's attorney entered carrying a leather folder. He adjusted his glasses and looked around the room. "Mrs. Rose Thompson has asked me to read a formal statement." He unfolded the document. "To my family, money should reward character, not ego. It should build futures, not feed pride." Edward folded his arms. The attorney continued. "For too many years, I stayed silent while one grandchild was praised and another was diminished. That silence was my greatest mistake." Grandma lowered her eyes. "I won't make that mistake again," she whispered. The attorney opened a second document. "I am establishing the Rose Thompson Foundation." Morgan looked up in surprise. "The foundation will provide free art education scholarships and creative programs for children from low-income families." Tears filled Morgan's eyes. The attorney smiled. "And I have appointed Morgan Thompson as its founding director." The room froze. Edward shot to his feet. "This is outrageous." The attorney calmly raised a hand. "There is more." He continued reading. "To ensure the foundation succeeds, I am leaving it the Manhattan building on 5th Avenue along with an endowment of $25 million. Victoria gasped. Jason stared at his grandmother in disbelief. Edward's voice trembled. $25 million. Grandma Rose met his eyes. You taught your children that money proves a person's value. She turned toward Morgan. I want my money to prove exactly the opposite. Morgan could barely speak. Grandma, I don't know what to say. Say you'll keep believing in children the way you always have. Morgan nodded through tears. I promise. For the first time in years, Edward realized that the daughter he had called a failure had become the person his own mother trusted most. And nothing he could say would change that. The news spread through the city within hours. Rose Thompson leaves millions to Granddaughter's Children's Foundation. Every business, newspaper, and society column carried the story. But Morgan ignored the headlines. Instead, she unlocked the doors of the old Fifth Avenue building for the first time. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, revealing empty halls that would soon become art studios, classrooms, and galleries filled with children's work. Grandma Rose smiled. What do you see? Morgan looked around the quiet building. I don't see an office, she said softly. I see a place where children will discover who they are. Grandma nodded. Exactly. Meanwhile, Edward watched the news from his office. For years, people had praised him as a brilliant businessman. Now they were asking a different question. Why did his own mother trust Morgan instead of him? The question followed him everywhere. At board meetings, at charity events, even old friends avoided discussing it. One evening, Edward drove alone to the foundation building. He found Morgan painting a colorful mural with a group of children. They laughed as they dipped their brushes into bright colors. Morgan noticed her father but didn't stop painting. After the children left, Edward quietly spoke. I came to apologize. Morgan looked at him for a long moment. I've waited my whole life to hear those words. He lowered his eyes. I thought success meant money, titles, and reputation. And now Morgan asked. He watched the mural covering the once empty wall. Now I think success is being remembered for making someone else's life better. Morgan gave a small, gentle smile. That's a lesson Grandma tried to teach all of us. Edward nodded. I know. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He knew it couldn't be demanded. It had to be earned. As he walked away, Morgan turned back to the mural. Children's laughter once again filled the building. For the first time, she realized she no longer needed her parents' approval. She had found something far more valuable, a life she was truly proud to live. 1 year passed. The Rose Thompson Foundation had become one of the city's most respected charities. Every afternoon, its classrooms echoed with laughter, paintbrushes, music, and dreams that finally had room to grow. More than 500 children had received free art lessons, scholarships, and supplies. The walls that had once stood empty were now covered with colorful paintings, each signed by a child who had learned to believe in themselves. Morgan walked through the gallery with Grandma Rose beside her. You built something beautiful, Grandma said. Morgan smiled. We built it together. That evening, the foundation hosted its first annual exhibition. Parents, teachers, artists, and community leaders filled the building. Among the guests were Edward, Victoria, Jason, and Charlotte. This time, they weren't the center of attention. They quietly took their seats in the back row. When Morgan stepped onto the stage, the audience greeted her with warm applause. She looked across the room before speaking. A year ago, I believed success meant earning someone's approval. Today, I know success means helping others discover their own value. The audience applauded again. Morgan then invited a young student named Lily onto the stage. The little girl held up her first painting with trembling hands. I used to think I wasn't good at anything. Miss Morgan taught me that everyone has a gift. Many people wiped away tears. Grandma Rose smiled proudly. Edward lowered his head. For the first time, he understood that no amount of money could equal the difference his daughter had made in hundreds of young lives. When the ceremony ended, he quietly approached Morgan. You were never a failure, he said. I was wrong. Morgan looked at him for a moment before giving him a gentle hug. It took us both a long time to get here. As the guests left, Grandma Rose watched the families laughing together. She whispered to herself with a peaceful smile, now this is what a true legacy looks like. The end. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and subscribe for more emotional revenge stories. See you in the next video.